Welcome back to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. It is Sunday PHONday here at MTG Burgeoning, and today we are going to begin a new deck building series around our oh-so-favorite shapeshifter with Changeling, and in today's debut, it is going to be WUBRG Tribal. What's up, MTG That is the MTG Burgeoning community. Here we are again for another build-around series with our oh-so-favorite shapeshifter, Morophon the Boundless. It's Sunday PHONday here at MTG Burgeoning, and today we are going to begin a new series of creating a WUBRG Tribal deck around Morophon the Boundless. Now, this isn't going to be any particular creature type. This isn't going to be any particular kind of synergy. The only thing we're looking for is the WUBRG in the casting cost or in the activation cost. That's a white, blue, black, red, green, and that's what this deck is going to be focused on. And in today's video, we are going to go through a massive stack of spells that's going to kick off this WUBRG tribal deck. The first is Chromanticore. This is going to be a fantastic addition to this deck as card number 1. It's one of each color for a 4/4 Manticore with flying, first strike, vigilance, trample, and lifelink. 5 keyword abilities on a 4/4 body for one of each color. That's just going to be aces in this deck. Additionally, if we cast this spell for its bestow mechanic, which is 2 colorless and 1 of every color, then this turns into an aura, which will enchant creature. An enchanted creature gets +4/+4, has flying, first strike, vigilance, trample, and lifelink. And if for some reason that creature ends up leaving the battlefield, then Chromanticore the aura becomes Chromanticore the creature. So we get the best of both worlds by casting it for its bestow cost. Chromanticore is a fantastic card number 1 in this WUBRG tribal deck. Next up, we're going Chromat, one of every color for a 4/4 with a litany of enemy-colored abilities in its text box. For an Orzhov, we can destroy target creature blocking or blocked by Chromat. For an Izzet, Chromat gains flying until end of turn. For a Golgari, we can regenerate Chromat. For a Boros, we can pump its power and toughness by 1 temporarily. And for a Simic, we can bounce Chromat to the top of our library. That's going to be one of the creatures that we can consider a potential threat to our opponents because of all of the many ways in which our opponents have to worry about it. Next up, and a current deck building series here on the channel, we got Garth One-Eye. One of every color for a 5/5 human wizard. We can turn him sideways, and we can name a card that hasn't been chosen from among Disenchant, Brain Geyser, Terror, Shivan Dragon, Regrowth, or Black Lotus, and then we create a copy of the card and we may cast the copy. Garth One-Eye gives us a lot more spells than just the WUBRG cost of a 5/5 human wizard. Next, we have Horde of Notions, our elemental lord for one of every color. It's a 5/5 vigilance, trample, haster, and for one of every color, we can play target elemental card from our graveyard without paying its mana cost. And we're going to have some ways in which to make sure that any creatures that end up in our graveyard have the potential to become elementals. We would not want to have a great ability like the WUBRG Recursion go to waste without having additional elementals in the deck. Next, for one of every color, we have the Maelstrom Archangel, a 5/5 flyer that when it deals combat damage to a player, we may cast a non-land card from our hand for free. So we just have to get Maelstrom Archangel in play, connect with an opponent, and then pick one of the best cards in our hand to put out on the battlefield. Maelstrom Archangel is WUBRG spell number 5. Next up, we've got Nivi. You know how much we love Nivi here at MTG Burgeoning. For one in every color, we get a 6/6 flying dragon. When Nivy ETBs, we reveal the top 10 cards of our library. For each color pair, we choose a card that's exactly those colors from among them and put the chosen cards into our hand and the rest in the bottom of our library. So Nivy, although this is going to be a traditional I shouldn't really say traditional because it's not like WUBRG Tribal is some kind of big archetype out there in Magic the Gathering. So for the purposes of trying our best to get something off of a Nivy trigger when it ETBs, we're going to make sure that numerous amounts of our other disruption and removal spells are 2 colors so that we can get something off of Nivy's ETB trigger. Even if we don't, a 6/6 flying dragon for 5, well, that's still going to work out pretty well. Our next creature is the Reaper King for 1 of any color, or for any combination of 2 and any other color. 2 colorless and a blue, black, red, green, or 4 colorless and a red, green, white. You know how that works. We have a 6/6 Scarecrow that gives other Scarecrows +1/+1, and whenever another Scarecrow comes into play under our control, we can destroy target permanent. Now again, similar to Horde of Notions, we're going to include some cards in this deck later on in the series that will allow us to have more than just the Reaper King as a Scarecrow in the deck, because that destroy target permanent ability is just too strong to let go without trying to take advantage of. All right, next up we have Scion of the Ur-Dragon, 1 of every color for a 4/4 flying legendary dragon avatar. We can tap 2 and search our library for a dragon card and put it into our graveyard. If we do, Scion becomes a copy of that card until end of turn. Again, similar to the Reaper King and similar to Horde of Notions, we're going to make sure that we include some ways in which to get all of our creatures to become dragons, to become scarecrows, and to become elemental so that these additional abilities do not fall by the wayside. Because let's be honest, who wouldn't want to activate Scion's ability, putting a quote-unquote dragon into the graveyard, and then using the Horde of Notions to quote-unquote put the elemental into play, all for the cost of 2 colorless and 1 of any color. All right, now let's shift our attention to a subset of creatures that, let's be honest, may be the most powerful subset of creatures in the history of Magic. Here we go, we're going for the slivers now. We got the Sliver Hive Lord, 1 of every color, and sliver creatures we control have indestructible. Unfortunately, this does not fit the typical mold up to the point that we were experiencing with our different sliver lords. This legendary sliver is a 5/5 and not a 7/7. Thank you very much, Magic 2015. Sliver Hive Lord, all slivers have indestructible. Next up, we have Sliver Legion, 1 of every color, and all sliver creatures get +1/+1 for each other sliver in play, and that's a 7/7, and that's what we like to see. All right, ooh, bad glare. Let's put that over here. That's a pretty bad glare, too. We've got some different lighting that we're working with here. Oh. All right, let's pause this here for a moment. All right, that looks about better. There we go. Kind of like I said, we were experimenting with a different kind of lighting here to see if we can make it look a little bit better in the videos. Okay, so we left off with Sliver Legion, and now it's time for the Sliver Overlord, 1 of every color. And we can tap 3 to search our library for a sliver card, reveal it, and put it into our hand. And we can also tap 3 to gain control of target sliver. Again, as we continue to reiterate, there are going to be some cards in this deck that's going to allow us to utilize all of these different abilities with a great deal of synergy. All right, the Sliver train continues. Next up, we have the Sliver Queen, 1 of every color. It is the very first WUBRG creature, very first WUBRG card, very first WUBRG legend in the history of Magic. It's a 7/7 Sliver legend, and we can tap 2 to put a Sliver token into play. That's a 1/1 colorless creature. Sliver Queen, you will always have a spot in this Morophon deck. Next up, and the last sliver to include, we have the first sliver. 1 of every color with a 7/7. It has Cascade, and it gives sliver spells. We cast Cascade as well. So imagine the synergy of having, just play this scenario out in your mind. We have all 5 sliver legends in our hand. Again, we'll show it later on during this series how that could be a very distinct possibility. And let's say we cast Morophon and we choose slivers. So, sliver 1 we cast as the first sliver, and then we trigger a cascade. But guess what? We're not paying WUBRG for that because Morophon reduces the casting cost. So in the end, we're going to end up casting 10 total spells minimally off of casting Morophon and naming slivers if we have all 5 slivers in our hand. Again, spoiler, we'll talk more about that as this series continues. Alright, now we're going to shift away from our creature spells that are WUBRG and the casting cost, and then we're going to talk about a few other creatures that we could get into play for WUBRG at a much greater discount, and that is the Bringer series. Not all of them are going to make it into this deck, but the select few that are in here for a reason. So we could tap 7 and 2 blue to put Bringer of the Blue Dawn into play, or we can just pay WUBRG instead. That's what we're going to do in this WUBRG tribal deck. And when we do, we have a 5/5 trampler that at the beginning of our upkeep, we draw 2 cards. And that's on top of the card that we draw during our turn. So this little guy will, I shouldn't say little guy, this biggin is going to triple the number of cards we draw during each of our turns, as well as put a 5/5 trampler onto the battlefield, all for white, blue, black, red, green. Bringer of the Blue Dawn, you are in. Continuing with the Bringers, we have Bringer of the Black Dawn. Exact same stats as Bringer of the Blue Dawn. It's 7 and 2 black, but we're paying 1 of every color instead. And again, we're going to get a 5/5 trampler. However, we're not going to draw 2 cards off of the Bringer of the Black Dawn. Instead, we are going to pay 2 life at the beginning of our upkeep, and then we're going to search our library for any card, put that card on top of it, and then move to our draw step. So how would you like to have a Vampiric Tutor at the beginning of your upkeep every single turn? Bringer of the Black Dawn is going to allow us to do that, and we are just going to go with that, baby. And the last Bringer of the series that we're going to include in this deck is Bringer of the Red Dawn. Again, it's 7 and 2 red, but we're paying 1 of every color instead. We got a 5/5 trampler that says at the beginning of our upkeep, we may untap target creature and gain control of it until end of turn. That creature has haste. So this is our way in which to interact with our opponent's boards if they have a nice choice creature that we want to borrow for a turn and send off into combat or send off to die. Bringer of the Red Dawn will allow us to do that. Now, for Bringer of the Green Dawn, I decided not to include that because all that does is create a 3/3 beast at the beginning of our upkeep, and that doesn't seem like it's worth a card slot when there are so many other much more powerful WUBRG cards that we can include. And the Bringer of the White Dawn lets us bring an artifact back from the graveyard at the beginning of our upkeep, but we're not really doing anything with artifacts that would make that worthwhile for inclusion, so we're going to just leave that one out as well. All right, so those are the creatures. And we have 6 more WUBRG spells to include with a little bit of an asterisk on this next card. The next card is a creature. However, the creature side of the card is not what interests us. It's what lies on the back. The creature card is Esika, God of the Tree. For 1 and 2 green, it's a vigilant god at 1 and 4, and it taps for 1 mana of any color, and then other legendary creatures we control have vigilance and can tap to add 1 mana of any color. Yes, that could help us out because as you can see here, we have many, many, many legendary creatures, and giving them all vigilance would be pretty nice, as well as pumping up the board through the use of mana ramp. That could be something we use Esika for. However, let's be honest, we really want to include the Prismatic Bridge. The Prismatic Bridge is a legendary enchantment for, you guessed it, BC, WUBRG colors. At the beginning of our upkeep, we reveal cards from the top of our library until we reveal a creature or planeswalker card. Spoiler alert, there will be no planeswalkers in the deck. We put that card onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of our library in a random order. So although Esika could be helpful in this WUBRG build, it's really the Prismatic Bridge that we want to include for power and for flavor. So that is the next card that's going into the deck. All right, next up, staying with the importance of auras and legendary auras, we have Genju of the Realms. For 1 of every color, this is an enchant land. And we can tap 2 colorless, and the enchanted land becomes a legendary 8/12 spirit creature token with trample, and it's still a land. So it will dodge all of those removals that target non-land permanents. And when enchanted land is put into the graveyard, we can return Genju of the Realm from our graveyard to our hand. So this kind of has like a Rancor ability, where if the permanent that's enchanted by it hits the yard, we're bringing it back to our hand. This gives us resiliency in being able to cast Genju more than 1 time during a game. But let's be honest, 2 colorless for an 8/12 spirit with trample? Whew, baby. Genju of the Realm, 1 copy is included because we can't include 20. All right, staying with enchantments, and this is going to be the last WUBRG enchantment included in this particular episode, and that's going to be Maelstrom Nexus. We like Cascade so much with the first sliver that we decided to include another spell. Maelstrom Nexus, of course, is 1 of every color, and it says the first spell we play each turn has Cascade. As we're spending so far 5 mana on each one of these spells, we're going to be able to cast something from our library that's going to really help even out the battlefield, bring us ahead, or put us ahead for good. Maelstrom Nexus is going to be a great inclusion in this deck. All right, so now let's shift our focus to some WUBRG sorceries, and we're going to go way back in time to the days of Apocalypse for this next spell, and that's going to be Last Stand. For 1 of every color, it is a sorcery that reads: target opponent loses 2 life for each swamp we control. Last Stand deals damage equal to the number of mountains we control to target creature. We put a 1/1 green Saproling creature token into play for each forest we control. We gain 2 life for each plains we control, and then we draw a card for each island we control, then discard that many cards from our hand. And if you've been following the history of MTG Burgeoning's 5-color decks, you know that we load up the full amount of Shocklands and Triomes so far for our 5-color mana bases. So that's going to help count as land types for casting Last Stand, in addition to any basics that we may have in play. So for just 1 of each color, the sheer amount of value that this card is going to give us, it is ridiculous. It's a life drain for an opponent. We get to take out a creature. We get to create some tokens. We get to gain some life, and we get to loot the top X number of cards of our library. Last Stand, we could consider that being one of those let's get real far ahead of our opponents and hope that we don't have to fall back to them. Last Stand is 1 of the last spells included in this deck. All right, next to last spell, you got 2 more to go here. The next sorcery is Bring to Light. Now, yes, this is not a WUBRG casting cost, but it will be our intention to cast this for WUBRG colors, because when we do, we can search our library for a creature, instant, or sorcery card with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of colors of mana spent to cast this spell, and then we can exile that card and shuffle our library, and we may cast that spell without paying its mana cost. So if we add the white, the black, and the red to go with the blue and the green in this spell's converted mana cost, then we're able to search our library for almost any one of these cards that we've already seen, except for the enchantments and the bringers, in addition to the Last Stand, and we could just cast that spell without paying its mana cost. Bring to Light is going to act as one of those potential win condition cards, depending on what we get out of our library. All right, MTGBC, here it is, the very last WUBRG spell for this video. It is another sorcery, and it's going to act as, I guess we could say, a tutor on steroids, and that's going to be Conflux. We've got our WUBRG up there with an additional 3 mana, so we're investing 7 into the spell, but the payoff will be amazing. We can search our library for a white card, a blue card, a black card, a red card, and a green card, reveal those cards and put them into our hand, then shuffle our library. So if you remember earlier when we were reviewing the slivers and the little sub-theme of slivers we included in this WUBRG tribal deck, and the foreshadowing of spoilers of how we can get those cards into our hand and potentially really ramp up our board, well, Conflux is one of those spells that will let us do this. Imagine again the scenario that we cast Morophon and make it around the board and untap with Morophon. We have Conflux in our hand, we cast it, we get all 5 of those slivers, and then we start to have a lot of slivery fun. Conflux is one of those cards that's going to do that for us, but it will not be the only one. All right, MTGBC, that is it for episode 1 of this WUBRG tribal deck with Morophon the Boundless. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic.